Hello, everyone. Welcome to Improving Academic Results with the Movement Program. I'm Alex Doman, founder and CEO of Advanced Brain Technologies. It's really my distinct pleasure to welcome my good friend and colleague, Alan Heath, co-creator of the Movement Program. How you doing, Alan?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Alex. Always a pleasure to spend time with you. And thank you to everybody for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. So this webinar is geared toward professionals working with kids who need help with learning in general, but may be struggling in school, or more specifically with reading, literacy, and math. As you'll learn, the benefits of TMP also extend well beyond the classroom. So if you happen to be here as a parent, we certainly welcome you to stay, as this information is of equal performance, of equal importance to you, as well as the educators and the practitioners that are working with your child. So this webinar is
geared Facebook Live volume that needs to go on.
Working with kids. I'm just checking audio right now. Okay. Sorry for that. So, and for you professionals that are joining us, this is a great opportunity for you to understand the movement program and the benefits of adding it to your toolkit of programs. So tonight we're going to be discussing the wide-ranging developmental and sensory areas covered by TMP, exactly which clients and students will benefit and why, how you can easily become a TMP provider affiliate, and much more, including some examples of the TMP movement sequences. So Alan, why don't we begin by your giving us a little background about what the movement program is?
Okay, certainly, Alex. Yeah. So the movement program is essentially a progressive developmental movement program. So if we break that down, it's a 12-week program, and across the 12 weeks, we begin sort of with early developmental stages and movements, and through the 12 weeks, it becomes progressively more complex. Okay, so that's the progressive part of it. Obviously, in terms of developmental movements, well, it's well understood that we go through certain stages and areas of development, whether that's in developing visual motor skills, developing things like bilateral integration, beat competency, the ability to cross over the midline, developing visual skills of tracking and vergence and pursuit movement, gross and fine motor, many different areas. So the developmental nature of the program, which I think, is quite different to many programs, is that we take a wide range of developmental areas and seek to move those along. And obviously, the program is based very much in movement and beat competency and rhythm. So, I think the other thing to mention, just as an overview, is it's aimed, as I say, it's a 12-week program. It's about 15 to 18 minutes a day, 5 days a week, and there are a wide range of movement sequences within the program as well. So it moves along quickly. We do each sequence of movement probably for about a minute to a minute and a half, 2 minutes maybe each day, and then come back to it the day after, and that moves along progressively. So that's an overview of it.
Well, I think that's a great beginning, Alan. And one of the things I really appreciate about the structure of TMP is the emphasis on the frequency, the intensity, and duration. Following a correct model for neuroplasticity so that we are developmentally building on the work that we did before. We're doing very, very short durations of high intensity with the appropriate frequency to really produce change, as opposed to 15 minutes doing, say, a single exercise, which would become quite monotonous. Having done this with our youngest son, he loved doing the program every day. He did it over the summer and wanted to keep coming back to it. So it's dynamic enough to really keep a child engaged and creating that drive to want to come back and see what's going to happen next.
Yeah, yeah. I think the other thing to mention, frequency, intensity, and duration, of course, hugely important. And each module as well is built such that we've got, essentially a warm-up, then all the activities and developmental work, and a cool down at the end. So there's that structure built into every single module as well.
Yeah, and many of you watching will be providers of the listening program, and naturally what Alan's referring to is the ABC modular design, which is built into much of our work. So we try to meet the client where they are, gradually increase the challenge to their brain in the activity, and then begin to decrease that challenge and integrate back into the prior activities. So I love how you've built that structure into this, Alan.
Excellent.
It's great.
Yeah, yes.
So I think now would be a great time to show the intro video, which for our viewers, this is available on themovementprogram.com to view anytime. But right now, Alan's going to go ahead and show us a little bit about the movement program so you can see a few of the activities.
Okay, yeah, we'll run that. Let's just find that on here. There we go.
Welcome to the Movement Program, a unique 12-week program of developmentally based activities. A large amount of research from areas such as neuroscience, learning and psychology now show that learning is more than just a process of the brain or mind. It requires the fundamental involvement of the body. The Movement Program is designed for anyone aged around 8 to 13 years old. In extensive trials since 2003, TMP has been shown to significantly improve reading age, balance and coordination, and even exam results taken at age 16 when the program was completed at age 11 to 12. TMP consists of a range of specifically chosen activities that become progressively more complex through the 12 weeks. Each movement is completed for less than 2 minutes a day, meaning lots of variety, challenge and fun. 15 to 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week, is all that is needed to really make sure your children have the skills necessary to listen and learn to their highest potential. Requiring only an internet connection, the daily TMP video will be delivered to your school or home through an internet-enabled device. Simply log in and the activities for that day can be played with the click of a button. Join us today to gain the real long-term benefits from the Movement Program.
Okay.
Great, thanks for that, Alan. Anything you'd like to expand upon after running that video?
I think yes, as an overview in terms of the delivery of the program, you can see there little snippets of a small number of the different types of movements were in there. But as I mentioned, this is about 15 to 18 minutes. It's delivered direct through an online streaming platform. So anywhere with internet connection, iPads, computers, smart screens in schools, it can be run very straightforwardly in school for a whole class or in a home for a family and a child. So very, very easy to run. And I think the whole idea of developing this type of program as well was to make this type of developmental movement program really, really readily accessible to families. And that, is something really important.
Well, Alan, you've got a long and storied history with movement programs, and we've known each other for quite a long time.
Yeah.
You've worked with various approaches with developmental movement sequences. My family background is such. My grandfather was a rehabilitation physician, and with his brother and their colleagues, they developed some of the earliest brain injury treatment protocols using developmental movement sequences based on their research. My father followed past that work with the National Association for Child Development, doing very refined and very personalized movement programs as part of a gestalt of many, many things that are done and personalized for the child. So it's been an interesting evolution to our collaboration with the movement program as well. So maybe a little bit of background on your history with movement and why this came to be, right? Because it's kind of an interesting story of the genesis of this in the UK schools. So maybe a little bit of your background and how TMP evolved.
Yeah. Well, my background essentially, as you say, from a background in psychology initially, anyway, but then movement first, and I came into the listening program as well, of course, about 17, 18 years ago.
Yeah.
Now, so I very much work with movement and sound from that developmental perspective, which absolutely, one of the things that first attracted me to this whole area was when I heard you speak at the INPP conference in Chester many years ago. And
that's in the way back machine.
Yes, but that was an important day for me. But yes, so I mean, my background in movement, yes, I've trained in rhythmic movement and reflex integration programs and bilateral integration programs and brain gym, and, so a whole range of programs, many of which, as you say, are built on your family's work anyway. So this is, really, really great for me to work with you on all this as well. And in terms of the movement program itself, that's really, the long-term collaboration between a group of academies in Kent. So there was a group of schools in Kent in the UK, and lots of people won't know, but the UK education system, some areas have grammar schools, which are basically, you take an exam. If you pass the exam and you're academic enough, you are allowed to go to that school. So Kent is one of those areas where the higher academic achieving children are creamed off into top schools, and if you like, the rest of the public school system, therefore, maybe has more challenges than other areas in the country. So this particular academy group that was headed by Frank Green, who later became the National Schools Commissioner, set up a sensory development centre because they were finding that many of their children coming into year 7 or 7th grade at age 11 were anywhere between 1 and 3 years behind in the reading age, and they couldn't therefore access the curriculum. So they started investigating what might make a difference that they could use for large numbers of students, for as low a cost as possible, of course, with the minimum number of staff. And they started playing around with programs, and as you know as well, they used the listening program too. And they found that programs based on developmental movements had a large impact. And because of my involvement with the listening program, and of course yourself as well, we became involved in 2009, and adjusted the program and continued to work with them. So based on results they were getting, which were really big improvements in reading age, improvements in balance and coordination, and also something we've not mentioned, but reduction in primitive reflexes as well. So integrating primitive reflexes. And on that basis, we developed the program over a number of years with them. So that was that goes back, almost 15 years now, the whole development of the program.
Yeah, it's been interesting for it to evolve and to think that often very not small ideas but small actions can lead to large outcomes. This started with a teacher,
yes,
trying to make a change for her students and introducing listening and introducing movement, investing in her own resources to develop things, getting some results, getting the attention of Frank, and the rest of the faculty, and then getting very overwhelming support to develop this into a very large scale longitudinal study. And the outcomes of that, we awaited many years.
We didn't we? Yeah. And of course,
exciting to have those practice now.
Yeah, evidence-based practice drives everything, though. So that was worth waiting for, and they did a fabulous job.
Yeah. They really did. So, Alan, let's touch on areas of development and processing that the movement program is showing to help.
Okay, yeah. If we get into the particular areas, I sort of gave you a list a bit ago. Everything from improving beat competency and rhythm through bilateral integration and gross and fine motor skills and all those. And I guess we could put that into an area of saying we are aiming to improve sensory processing, sensory integration in its widest term. So in improving the link between vestibular system and vision, for instance. And I think there's let's explain it this way. So
demonstration, great.
Hey, bro. So I think one of the big things about development and sensory processing and vestibular function, which again we know so much about with the listening program, through the use of the wave system, is working on vestibular function. And so many children with challenges with reading, concentration, gross and fine motor skills, sports skills, have challenge with vestibular function. So if we think what that is, of course, I just happen to have here.
In here.
And if we look at the vestibular portion there, we can see the three semicircular canals, and these respond beautifully and link beautifully to balancing our body. Of course. So, of course, what we're talking about here really is being able to move side to side and then come back and be still on that lateral midline, okay, which developmentally as well, we know is so important to be able to cross over the midline and work in that midfield area. So we've got side-to-side movement, but of course, that's important in sequencing information, understanding left and right, but we can also move forwards and backwards. And of course, we can move up and down as well. So this is essentially, the vestibular system is, of course, those three dimensions of movement. And I remember going to another IMPP conference, actually. It may be the one you spoke at, where there was a vestibular expert, a professor from, I think, Denmark or Finland, talking about the vestibular system. And he said the highest function of the vestibular system is to allow us to be still. So, if that's all in balance and working well, then it actually allows us to be still and to attend externally. So there's so much underpinning that. And of course, Dr. Tomatis as well called that the vestibular integrator. That, all of the sensors are referenced to the vestibular system. So a big part of what the movement program is about is actually to help integrate, say, the visual system with the vestibular system. So we've got specific movements and slow controlled movements that help develop vestibular function. But then we've got movements where we'll be doing visual activities, but there's a vestibular component. In fact, if I just share another video here, we can see one that has multiple components in it. So we'll just run this one.
And this is the on the move, right?
Yep. On the move.
Every day, the movement program will begin with an on-the-spot march. Listen to the beat of the music, watch them, and join in. And look forward. Again, and forward again, look left and forward, look down and to the front, look up and to the front, and while you're marching you go.
Okay, so that's the first activity each day. And if we pull that apart and look at what that's doing, there's clearly a lot to do with beat competency. So we asking somebody to move exactly to the beat, and as we go through the different days and weeks of the program, the beat changes, you know, as well. So sometimes it will be a little bit slower and the music changes, and of course there's a large amount of research from people like Usha Goswami at Cambridge University, Nina Kraus at Northwestern, and you know the paper as well, Tierney and Krause's paper in 2013, which showed very clearly that children who have challenges with beat competency have challenges with literacy, movement, and listening, and all sorts of other things as well. So working on beat competency is important. And of course, what we're doing as well is not only working on beat competency there, but we're asking them to march with the opposite arm and leg. And so many parents come back, you know, the feedback that I get on the program often is many parents will say, I'm absolutely really surprised that my child can't do that at the beginning. You know, that actually what they're doing is marching with the same arm and leg.
Right.
Which is a developmental earlier stage, of course. So doing that for, you know, only a minute or so, day after day, 5 days a week, helps build that skill.
Yeah.
But then you saw little components of the 12-week program in that sample there. But when we get into the later weeks and we're lifting our head up and down and to the side, then what we're doing is adding in a different visual component and vestibular, because it can be very different if you're doing that type of movement and looking upwards compared to looking downwards. So that brings in, you know, a vestibular component as well. So even if we just take one seemingly quite straightforward movement like on the move, there are different components in that feed in through the weeks.
So, you know, really within many of the activities that developmental progression is advancing as the skills are building and developing. And you'll see, and I notice this with our son, that when you begin to add those head movements, that you begin to see the beat competency challenge more, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And so
yes.
then the brain adapts and the integration improves with that. So I like just that novelty and that gradual increase in the vestibular challenge, tied with the rhythm and timekeeping.
Now, and of course, all these things are grounded in research too. So yes, we've got, you know, we've already mentioned the research on the movement program itself that was conducted. But for instance, you know, what you mentioned there specifically, there was a study published in 2015 by somebody called Bassett. And of course, if anybody wants the links later, you know, we can sort that out. But it was published in Nature Neuroscience. And that was really fascinating, because what it showed clearly for the first time is that when we're learning a physical skill, then there are a lot of higher cognitive areas of the brain involved in sorting out the movement and controlling the movement and paying attention. As we become more skilled at the movement, then, as you know, we would hope, and what happens, of course, is those higher cognitive areas show a lot less activity and a lot less integration with the lower areas of the brain. So that, you know, that's a really lovely study that shows us that if our movement is not unconscious or automatic, then those higher areas of the brain that should be involved in comprehension and attention, you know, are actually focused on the movement that's happening, because that's still so conscious. So, you know, I think that underpins the program as well. You know, the more automated the movement is, and this is why beat competency, of course, is so important as well. But the more automated the movement is, the more it frees up the brain for learning anyway.
Well, that's the key word, right? These fundamental movements that are associated with lower brain areas, we should do in the appropriate pattern and timing with automaticity. And
Yes.
when we're cognitively having to think about that sequence, that's the very prime example. So what you see is you get the fluidity develop as we go through the program.
Yes.
And
that's, you know, that's lovely for parents to see as well, as you mentioned there with Brendan, you know, to see some of these things a little bit tricky at the beginning, right, and then see the fluidity come and begin. You know, I was just talking to some parents in Ireland a week or so ago who are in about week 7. And they'd had that, you know, early weeks. They were quite surprised at how difficult some of the things were, but of course they build slowly, and there's lots of repetition, you know, as we said, with frequency, intensity, duration. And as often happens, they hadn't told school that their son was doing the program, just right, so they could see, and they checked into school and were told his behavior has massively improved, and his ability to sit and concentrate is much improved. And that's, of course, you know, from an improvement in sensory processing and postural improvements, and going back to the vestibular system, that ability to be able to be still.
Right.
So that we can attend externally and use the higher cognitive areas for what we should be using them for. So.
Now, Alan, let me interject. Is this the same family that the parents also did the program?
Oh, no,
is this a different family? So we'll talk about that. It's just coincidental that this is another Irish family. Okay.
It is, yes.
We'll get to them later. Forgive me.
Okay. Fine. Yeah.
So I think we've talked about some of the background and some of the research and areas that are being developed, and you've brought up reflexes quite a bit. And from your vantage point, what are you observing? Because a lot of the practitioners we work with will do primitive reflex integration work, and they believe it's very foundational toward development and learning. And to a certain degree, I appreciate that. But could you maybe just spend a couple minutes from your perspective on what you're observing with reflex integration with TMP, and are you observing in your clinical practice, and as you're talking to practitioners, that you're seeing these reflexes integrate through TMP without doing specific reflex integration activities?
Yes, I think there's a couple of ways we can look at that. Firstly, because actually it was one of the things that they assessed at Lee Academy in the initial clinical trials. So in terms of, oh, excuse me.
Take a drink.
Oh, yeah. In terms of the initial trials that were done there, they looked at, and I have as well, you know, there was some work done by Martin McPhillips at Belfast University, who looked across many children in Ireland and assessed reflexes. Again, this was in Northern Ireland, in Belfast, and identified 4 main reflexes that seem to be most important in terms of learning and cognitive function.
Okay.
So for those of you that work with reflexes, they were the mono reflex, the asymmetrical tonic neck reflex, the tonic labyrinthine reflex, and the symmetrical tonic neck reflex. So those were identified as the main ones that affect learning. And yes, you know, we can do reflex programs and help inhibit or integrate those reflexes. What the work at Lee Academy showed with assessing pre and post those 4 reflexes is that there's a statistically significant reduction in reflexes on those. And I think this actually takes us back almost to the improvements in behavior and posture and things as well. Because if those reflexes are in place, you know, then we're having to change our behavior and what we're doing to compensate for those reflexes. You know, so something like, again, lots of you may know the asymmetrical tonic neck reflex is the one where if a baby is laid on the back, and my granddaughter is 8 months old now at the moment, so I've watched this come and go, and it's great. So, you know, what will often happen, you'll see that if they turn their head to one side, then you'll get this movement with their arms like this. So there's a tendency for that to happen, and that's of course the beginnings of hand-eye coordination and laterality, and that should come into place and then be integrated. Now, for many children with a range of challenges, it may not do. So yes, for people who work with reflexes, they will assess for that sort of reflex, and that will affect things like writing. You know, if we turn our head, then there's a tendency for this arm to want to come up here, but it's down here to write. So we're having to compensate and, you know, drive the pen into the paper and all this sort of thing. So yes, those main reflexes are built into the movement program. For myself clinically, yes, you know, when I see those reflexes, actually the working with the listening program can integrate those anyway with low frequency sound, but that's not why we're here this evening, but I've got to mention that too. But working with the movement program as well, absolutely, you know, we see pre and post that those reflexes are integrated, and we see the changes, you know, on a day-to-day basis and in school anyway, in terms of improved gross and fine motor skills, you know, reflexes integrated. And of course that, in terms of sports as well, that makes a huge difference.
So, you know, some people may be joining us midstream right now. Let's just take a moment, Alan, in your words, a very quick description of what the movement program is and who would benefit from it for those that might just be joining us now.
Okay. Well, yeah, the movement program is a progressive developmental program. So the sort of high level overview is that it's a 12-week program with lots of different developmental sequences within it. And those sequences are changed regularly, so they become progressively more complex as we go through. And that takes us through the developmental stages, and also takes us through improving visual motor skills and gross and fine motor skills and all sorts of things like that. In terms of who can benefit, which we've not really discussed, the main area initially that was focused upon was improving reading ability. So when the trials were initially followed, that was the main area that was focused on for improvement, was reading ability in 11-year-old children going up to secondary school in the UK. Now, we also know that this program, as we would hope and expect with a movement program anyway, improves gross and fine motor skills as well. It improves timing in the body. We hear a lot about postural improvements and that ability to be still that we've talked about. So, you know, we see those feed through into improvements in behavior and concentration in class. And then the whole area of improving sequencing ability and timing for movement helps with developing sports skills as well. So, you know, we're beginning in the UK to look at working with football clubs, although that's early stages,
Right.
and tennis academies as well, because they've seen the program, they see the benefit for improving sport as well. And it's, you know, the same underpinning idea really. If we can improve movement and the coordination and the sequencing and timing of movement, then that helps academically and in class, but obviously in terms of sports too.
So we have a number of practitioners here from varied backgrounds, Alan. Occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, psychologists, educators, medical doctors of different disciplines, very broad ranging. Does the movement program replace anything they're doing, or is it really an adjunct to what they're offering? And I'm leading you here.
Yes.
Clearly.
Yes. Essentially it's an adjunct as a home program.
Right.
I see. So it doesn't replace deeper clinical work.
Right.
In any way, because this is naturally, it's developed as a program that can be used at home. And the beauty of it, I would say, is because it's on screen and you can see the movements, then the parents can do it with the child.
Right.
And you can see what movement is needed to be done in what timing. Now, clinically, for myself, what I find a challenge still, if I do individual movement work with children, is that I can have a parent and a child in clinic. I can show them the sequences of movements that I want them to go away and do at home, and yet there's absolutely no way you can guarantee that they've processed what needs doing. You can give them sheets of paper, you know, and yet we can't over a period of time know that those are being followed.
Right.
I get, you know, this is something else that drove the development of the program really. So to come back to the sort of initial question, I don't see it as a replacement to any other programs.
Yep.
I see it very much as an adjunct or an additional therapy that can be done. You know, if we take occupational therapy, then there will be occupational therapy work being done in clinic. This can be done at home to support that development.
So, you know, clearly, you know, many of you that are here with us as parents or practitioners, many are going to need much more individualized, personalized work to their unique needs. What's great about TMP is it's non-invasive. It's easy to follow. It's very accessible. It's something that has a structure to it and is developmentally based. And so we're seeing through advanced brain technologies, as many of our listening program and in-time providers are beginning to offer TMP, they've been looking for an at-home movement therapy that really offers what this is, because it's quite unique, right? So there are different movement therapies out there that are quite good. Might be helpful for you to compare and contrast other beneficial programs and how the movement program is different from those.
Yes, and I think yes, I would say it's unique, and I think you can put programs that use movement and rhythm and things into two general categories really. There are the developmental sort of programs that are reflex based or timing based. and steeped in developmental movement.
Mm-hmm.
And those are great individual programs. Okay. I think the challenge I found, and having trained in many of them and working with many of them as well, I find lots of parents who've had to go from one practitioner to another practitioner to another practitioner to another practitioner to access different types of programs over a long period of time. So that's one area. I think the other general area of programs is programs that use rhythm to help learn curriculum materials.
Right.
So they're not developmentally based. They're programs that happen to be using rhythm and music, because we know, and again, there's lots of research on the impact of cueing movement
Mm-hmm.
with music or beat.
Right.
That improves the connectivity between different areas of the brain. So there's a good piece of research on that that's recently published. But yeah, the programs that just use rhythm to learn curriculum materials, I would put completely in a different area. And they're great, of course,
Right.
but they're based on learning times tables or ABCs or whatever it might be. So they're a different type of program altogether.
So is it fair to say this is a new category of movement program because of the sequencing, the developmental nature, and the largely the delivery, right? How this is presented and made accessible is quite unique.
Yes, I think it is. It's certainly a unique delivery, and it benefits from that delivery. And it needs to actually be that type of delivery because of the wide range of areas that we're covering with all the different sequences of movements.
Well, and it takes the guesswork out of it. I know often when parents are working at home with their kids and they're wondering, are we doing this right? Well, you just look at the screen.
Yes.
And the fact that the students that are on the screen doing the activities doesn't mean your child's doing them correctly. So you want to be there with them and you want to supervise them and model for them. If you could do the activities properly, we have found that we've brought people in here at the offices at ABT and in our large classroom and actually had multiple people doing the program, and not everyone can follow the sequences correctly in the beginning.
Yes.
Even though they're quote unquote together.
Yeah. And
right.
I think there's a couple of things there I just want to pick on as well. One is that, the children who probably need individualized programs are the ones with the more complex needs anyway, of course.
Right.
So in a way, if we're looking at this as an adjunct program, then that's for the kids with more complex needs.
Right.
Somebody who's in a mainstream school and finding difficulty reading
mm-hmm.
could do this program.
Right.
And it's been shown, get big improvements in reading and all the other areas. But I think the other thing I just want to pick up on there is when you're talking about parents doing it as well, because this does take us back to the other family that I know I've talked to you about, where the mum and dad have done the whole program with their son through a great physiotherapist in Ireland called Leonie Smith, and we got some words from them which you can find on the Movement Program Facebook page, and actually the feedback they gave us, about 80% of it is about the benefit to the parents, which was fantastic. But mum and dad just did the program with son to help, and he had big improvements in reading ability, which was what they were looking for. So that was fabulous. But the story from mum and dad is that they were both in the local golf club, but had never really done much competitively, or succeeded. And they went through the movement program for the 12 weeks, went into a mixed pairs golf tournament and won it. And as a result of that, dad has been picked for the county team So the feedback from them was very much about how it's improved their golf and their timing and their ability to be stress-free when they're making the important shot and things like that. So yeah.
Well, it's about I'm a struggling golfer, and emphasis on struggling, and it is again about that fluidity and flow and automaticity and getting out of your head and just being present in that movement that's taking place. So it is really building a foundation for that, and this touches right because the research on the movement program were really ages 8 to 13. So when we talk about the benefits of TMP, right, we're really recommending for kids that are struggling with their grades, right? They're DC students that are just close to unlocking that B to A. They're struggling with reading. They're reading below grade level, comprehension issues, literacy, in math, and then coordination, balance issues that we're seeing as well. So that's typically who's doing this. But we're now getting experience with people under age 8 and over age 13, well over the age of 13. So what we focus on ages 8 to 13 because that's where the data is.
Yes.
But so that's important to emphasize, but it doesn't exclude other ages. So maybe you could just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, you're completely right there, Alex. I think, yes, I think there is, I think most 5-year-old normally developing children would struggle to access this program.
I agree.
But by 6, yes, challenging. 6, 7, definitely fine.
Yeah.
And then the over 13 age, as you say, that was put on because of the initial work that was done.
Right.
But of course, as we know, we can always use neuroplasticity, and we can always improve our timing and sensory processing and gross and fine motor skills, and at any time. Yeah. So yes, I'm working with people who are in their 70s, who've lost balance and coordination. So essentially, I certainly wouldn't call this a falls program. I don't know. Do you have that term in the US?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Fall prevention is a major emphasis in the American healthcare system, right, because of the cost of falls to the insurance companies. So with a large population, a large percentage of our population being a aging population, the applications and the interest in this, and interestingly, I know a number of providers that are doing their own TMP program. First of all, because you understand it better if you've done it, right? You can explain it, and doing something and knowing it helps you much better be an advocate for it. But they're finding their own benefits and have their own motivation for why they think it may help them. They're just intuitively understanding the movements and how they help a child, how that translates.
Yeah. Yes. So certainly older adults as well can find improvements in balance and movement and coordination. Very much so.
So Alan, it would be great. Do you have one more video that you could show an example of another exercise and maybe share what its focus is?
Absolutely. Yes. Let's just show you this. This one will run, is called eye strengthening.
Okay.
So it's very much about improving visual skills of visual tracking and convergence and pursuit movement, and also links into vestibular function as well.
Great.
So we'll talk about that in a sec. I'll just show you this video.
Last time through, head back and and forwards. Keep watching your hands as you move them slowly away from you and back again. And rest. And slowly move it out to the left, watching your thumb, moving your head, keeping your eyes still. Now back to the center. Out again as far as you can. And now slowly back. Now out for the last time. All the way. And slowly back to the center. And rest. Slowly move it out to the right as far as you can see it. Then all the way back across to the left. And back to the center. And we're going to do this 3 times. And then 3 times with the left arm. Out to the left. Round to the right. Up for a vertical 8. Down. To the left. Right. Up. Down. Keep your eyes on your thumb all the time, and once more through.
Okay, so you can see in that one that there's a lot of work on one side and then the other side, and then we begin to work integrating the vision in that middle area with doing the 8s and up and down and things like that. And it's a good point to just have a really quick quiz, which is actually you'll have to answer for everybody, Alex, but could you just tell me what that is?
It's a chair.
Ah, well done. Yeah, it's not a trick question. So what about that?
Same chair.
Okay, still a chair. This?
Same chair, Alan. I'm not going to make this easy on you.
Oh, okay, you get the idea. So we'd agree that that's
BBPQ.
Exactly. You're that. Oh, what's that?
That would be the B.
Oh, is that the B? Do you know, it's funny looking at my screen and trying to work out what that is.
There's the D.
Oh, yeah.
There's our P.
And the P, and
kind of a Q.
Kind of a Q with a bit on. Yeah, and I think the point I'm just trying to make here is that we grow up in this 3-dimensional vestibular-based world where we learn 3 dimensions. So actually the chair, because we can move around it and see it from any angle, it's always a chair. So we go from that 3-dimensional world into a 2-dimensional world of letters and numbers on a page, and we just expected or sort of to know the rules.
Right.
And of course the rules are very different. So it's no wonder that when many children are younger, they'll reverse letters and numbers and words. It's a natural thing as we're building laterality and visual laterality and sequencing left to right. And once that's in place, then of course we can look at the B and the D and know that they're called something different. And it's a separate set of rules to the chair.
Sure.
Because it's not 3-dimensional, it's 2-dimensional. So I think, part of what eye strengthening is about, but it links back to all the vestibular things and a lot of work that's in the program on crossing the midline and sequencing between left and right. So understanding sequences like that, all those things underpin that sort of development. And just one other point I'd just throw in as well is, again, I mentioned that it's all grounded in research from different areas. Well, there's certainly plenty of research available as well to show that children with reading challenges often have difficulties with tracking and vergence skills, not surprisingly perhaps. And that if we do activities which are absolutely in the program about building tracking skills, doing different things where we might keep the eyes still and move the head, or we move the head and the eyes, so all the different components and combinations we can do, that improves tracking and vergence skills and the links with the vestibular system, and it improves reading. So the research all shows that anyway.
Great explanation. Alan, many of the people joining us are providers, actually, of the listening program. And there will be parents whose children are participating in TLP. Could you explain how TLP and TMP can be combined and if they should be used together?
Yes, absolutely.
Touch on some of the research at Lee that helps us understand the basis for what you're going to share.
Yeah. Yes, and I think I'd come first from a point of my intuition, my gut feeling was always that movement and sound work really well together, and the order to do it in would be to do sound first. That was always what I believed to be the case.
Right.
And actually, the great thing about the work they did at Lee Academy in that sensory development center was that backed it up completely. Because we mentioned earlier on, they did the movement program, they also did the listening program.
Yep.
In the first trials they did those separately. So they took groups of children and a control group, of course. You know, the group that did the movement program got great results. The group that did the listening program got great results compared to the controls, statistically significant, wonderful. Right. So naturally, they then asked the question, well, if both the movement program and the listening program get good results, do we get twice the results if we do them together? So what they then did was they had a group of students who did movement followed by listening. They had a group that did listening followed by movement. They did a group that did listening and movement simultaneously. And the really interesting thing was that the group that did way beyond anybody else in terms of results was the group that did listening program first and then the movement program.
And there it's important to qualify on the sequencing, because there's a lot of belief that simultaneously listening and doing movement would naturally be best. And what the research actually showed is you do a 12-week protocol of listening followed by a 12-week protocol of movement, right? So we're not doing these in the same day. We're sequencing, do a program, then do another program, and the best statistical significant outcomes in the study were TLP, then movement.
Yes, and to me that makes sense, because it's, you know, I always look at the listening program and see it as priming the system, you know, getting that vibration through the body, and the improvements in timing, listening, attention, concentration, right, you know, primers to then do the active program. And I think there's a situation with certainly some kids where if you do them simultaneously, you can do too much anyway.
Right.
You know, that it just, we can't deal with anything because you're doing too much. Yeah. It's that idea that, you know, it actually goes back to that research from Bassett that I mentioned about, you know, cognitive processing being involved in processing lower areas. Yeah. So if we're doing too much, then it will have not much effect. Yeah. But if we prime the system first and then do the active program afterwards with movement and rhythm, that makes sense to me. And so yes, that's what
sure. You know, the beautiful thing is they can be sequenced one after the other, and you know, they each stand alone on their own.
Yeah.
And work as adjuncts.
Absolutely.
Our goal for our time this evening was to spend about an hour, you know, going into the movement program, and we're coming up on that pretty shortly here. So as we're getting close to the conclusion, we're going to give some information about how you as practitioners can get started with TMP, how schools and families can access it, and really next steps. And also, Alan and I will stay on, and if you're on the live Zoom broadcast, you have the opportunity to ask questions through the Q&A bar. And if you've got some questions, we'll hang around for a little bit and be happy to answer those. But what I'd like to do is to go ahead and talk about some of those next steps. But Alan, any kind of closing remarks from you before we talk about some of the logistics?
Only to say that I guess, I'm really excited about the movement program. You would expect me to be anyway, but as a therapist of many years, this is the program that I wanted 20 odd years ago that wasn't around. So that, I guess, for people who are working with children with reading difficulties or motor problems or, rhythm and timing issues, or just for anybody normally developing, this can have an impact. So, I recommend it, which of course I would.
Well, thank you for that. And in the same vein, I'm equally excited that we've had this opportunity for Advanced Brain Technologies, Learning Solutions, yourself, Frank Green, Lee Academy, to, bring this to be after close to 15 years of work. And, Advanced Brain Technologies just had its 19th anniversary. And ever since the beginning of listening, given my family background and the interest in movement therapies, people think, why isn't there movement with the listening program? And the answer is because it needs to be done correctly. And it needs to be researched, and there needs to be a good foundation, and all good things come in time in the movement program. We believe, based on what we know today, to be that best answer for what we're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with the group. And as I do that, I just want to walk through for the those of you that are watching. The website for the movement program is simply movementprogram.com, as you should see here on the screen. And if you're a professional looking at doing the movement program, it's really very straightforward. You go to the professionals link on the site, and to become a provider of TMP, you can sign up for a free 3-hour training course, which is online. So when you sign up, you'll actually have access to this training course. It's 3 hours long. When you've completed that training course, you'll receive what's called a provider affiliate ID. And when you use that ID to refer your clients to the website, they can sign up for the program. And I'll show you where you do that here. So they would go to sign up. And when they sign up, they'd create an account on the website. And when they create that account, they'd enter what's called a coupon code. That's your referral ID. And when they do that, your clients get 10% off the program price. So there's an advantage for them working with you. But you don't need to do anything. Simply refer them to the website, and they can sign up for the program directly. And also, as a provider affiliate, you then have other benefits for referring clients to the program, as well as colleagues, which you'll learn about in your training and the subsequent information that you receive. If you're a family that's currently watching this video and you don't have a practitioner that you know that offers the movement program, you're welcome to come directly to movementprogram.com. There's webinars that you can watch for families, as well as the professionals I should have mentioned, but you can just come here directly and sign up. But if you are working with a TMP provider, you do get that benefit of the added discount. Then also for schools, the movement program started in schools, so naturally it is available for schools under special license. So with access to the movement program, if you go to movementprogram.com and select schools on the website, you can simply contact our UK offices where you'll interface with Alan and his team to get information for licenses. And it's also important to understand that the movement program is all done online. It is streaming. You don't download any software. You can access from any internet-connected device that has internet speed that's sufficient, say, to stream Netflix or Amazon Prime Video. So if you can stream video, or if you're using the listening program online platform and that's working well for you, the movement program will work great on your computer and with your device. So for further information, you can go to movementprogram.com. Alan, I want to thank you for getting up at a very early hour in the UK. What time is it there presently?
Always a pleasure. It's 2:05 in the morning now.
Well, you're looking bright and chipper for that time, and I'm just on the end of my day here in Utah. So everyone, thank you very much for tuning in. If you're on Facebook Live, also thank you for joining us there. But those that are on the Zoom call, if you've got any questions, you can go ahead and type those into the Q&A, and Alan and I would be very happy to answer those in writing or publicly to the group. So we'll just give you a couple minutes to see if there's anything that you'd like to ask of us at this time. Okay. And Alan, maybe you can do a little song and dance while we wait to see if there's any questions to entertain our viewers. You up for it?
What could we do? I'm just wondering if we covered. Oh, the one thing we didn't mention.
Yeah.
So I'll just sort of carry on, and we'll see for a couple of minutes then. But in terms of the session of the movement program, we have got a relaxation session at the end of each module as well. So, in terms of somebody being calm and ready for the day, then absolutely, that's part of it. And actually, it reminds me that one of the boys in England that's doing it, who's 12, his comment on what did he like about the movement program was, well, I like the relaxing bit. He said, because we have busy lives, don't we, and we don't get much chance to relax these days. So the little 1 to 2 minute relaxation sequence at the end is great, and is important in terms of stress reduction these days.
Yeah, thank you. Alan, we've got a number of questions, and we can go ahead and begin. We're going to answer each of you live. Natalie O'Donoghue asked, can you repeat the movement program with an individual? And if so, at what intervals would that be?
So if you've done the 12-week program and you might want to do it again, then of course you could. Now, if we look at the research that was done in the schools, it wasn't repeated. They did the program once. We see the improvements in motor skills and the developmental improvements, and they therefore stay. So I guess the answer is, if as a parent you feel your child can still benefit further having completed the program, then yes, of course we can complete it. But there's no great necessity to do so, I would say, actually.
Well, I'm going to add, we did the movement program over the summer with Brendan, who's 7, and he's actually asked to repeat it. And we believe that we're going to see added benefit. So we're actually just getting ready to finish that, get that started once he finishes his current cycle of listening.
Yeah,
that's going on. So great answer. Alyssa has asked if there's any printed materials that accompany the movement program, and we didn't talk about the guide.
We didn't, no. And I guess in terms of practical usage of it, when somebody subscribes to the program through the sign-up page that you were just showing there on the website, they will of course receive welcome emails, and they'll receive a regular series of emails which briefly explains the different parts of the program. Now, one of those emails has a link to the movement program movements booklet as well. So there are printed materials. They don't show all the different activities, because as you can probably understand, because it's changing every couple of days, and we're doing all sorts of 11 different sets of activities with multiple components to them. There isn't a static picture of every one, and that wouldn't really be of a great benefit. But there is a movements booklet that you can get a link to once you've subscribed.
Right. And another question that's come in, Alan, is Interactive Metronome, a program that we both think is a fantastic program.
Yep.
That IM places a huge emphasis on the role of immediate auditory and visual feedback. TMP, we don't mention feedback other than watching the videos. How important do we feel that component of constant feedback is, especially in relation to attention?
I think that's a really good question, because it actually, for me, it makes me think about the difference between bottom up and top down as well, and the role of attention in guiding movement and things like that. So there certainly is a role. I think my first thought in answering that is, when you're looking at interactive metronome and you're working with millisecond precision sometimes in terms of beat competency and timing, then actually immediate feedback may well help, of course. So right. Yeah, and the movement program is not that type of program in a way. So when we're doing, we showed the on the move sequence of movements there earlier on, and obviously, we want somebody to be able to match the beat, but we're not dealing with milliseconds in terms of this program. So yes, the feedback is, does it look like I'm doing the movement? And actually, in terms of beat competency, when we look at testing beat competency with things like tabs, then that gives feedback on screen anyway, and you can pretty much tell, or a parent will be able to tell, if the child is a few milliseconds out in terms of timing, because if you've got good timing yourself, you can pick that up because it just feels off.
Okay. Great. I hope that sufficiently answers the question. Yvette has asked, can you stop and resume the program before the 12 weeks? And how often can they repeat it? So I think it's useful to know, when you purchase the movement program, you're purchasing a 12-week program, and there is some extra time built in to allow for starts and stops as you go through it, but you're purchasing a complete protocol for one use when you're making that investment.
Yeah.
Another question has asked, if a client doesn't have internet access for a few days during their program, how does that impact? That's not an issue, because the program picks up where you left off. So ideally, we don't want large gaps for the plasticity benefits, but a few days here and there are going to happen. As we went through the program over the summer, it was never a perfect 5 days a week with our boy. So the program will bookmark where you are, and then you'll go right back to where you left off. And you also, if you've been away for a few days, you do have the option of backtracking a few days and then picking up and moving forward again. So the program does offer that flexibility for you.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, we've talked about we had a question again about TMP differing from interactive metronome, and I think we've addressed that question. I hope. If not, let us know, MP Braggers, if we need to go further on that. There's also, what's the cost to get the program? So the cost for an individual to do the program is roughly $250 US or $195 British sterling. With that provider code, when a family uses it, they automatically receive a 10% discount off of that price for the 12-week program. So it will reduce the price accordingly for that. Kylie's asked the question, when working with children with more special needs or further development, what would we recommend we use with TLP and TMP? 12 weeks of TLP and then TMP, then continue repetition and consideration of growth goals. So for more involved kids, we would want to generally with the listening program do something like a spectrum protocol with bone conduction. We want to do that foundational listening. And then once we've done that foundational listening, then we can take a run through a TMP program. Then as we watch how well the child's done with it, we can then assess if we want to go through and repeat that sequence. And Alan, I don't know if you'd like to elaborate or if you might answer that any differently.
No, clinically, that's exactly what I do. So my clients will, yes, they'll either work with, usually with these type of clients, it will be level 1 or spectrum or in time, of course, and then into the movement program protocol. Yeah. Look at where they are, and yes, we'll do some repeat listening.
Yeah, as well. Beautiful. I'll leave this name anonymous, but we've had a very nice comment come into us, Alan. Said, no questions, just thanking us for bringing forth the movement program. It's exceeded her expectations. She's 2 weeks from finishing the program for herself. Balance, posture, visual improvements, coordination, and muscle tone have all been areas of benefit. She's also noticed an easiness in all the movements. Very comfortable in her own skin, no doubt children will benefit too. And to that individual, who I'll leave anonymous, thank you very much, and we're thrilled to see how the program's helping you.
What a wonderful way of putting it. Thank you. I'm comfortable in my own skin. It's that because I think for me that speaks very much about everything we've talked about vestibular function and laterality and proprioception, and because if we know where we are physically, then we know where everything else is, and we feel grounded and secure in that. And that's we've not really highlighted that much at all, but it's just a great program for feeling comfortable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wonderful. Mary Pat Carrero has asked us, and she may have missed this portion of the webinar, programs presented for being ages 8 to 13. What about using it with younger children? So for Mary Pat's benefit, can you talk about the over-under on the 8 to 13 ages and why we have that age range?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the age range that it was initially worked on within schools, is that. So that's really where we started from. Certainly developmentally, children of about 6 or 7 will be able to access the program. Obviously, there are some areas they'll find challenging as we get through the weeks, but then lots of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds and 20 and 30 and 40-year-olds will also find some of the areas challenging. That's fine. That's why we've got lots of repetition built in there. So yes, slightly younger is fine, and actually anybody over 13, as has been mentioned, people in their 60s, 70s are doing the program to help with vestibular function and balance and maintaining movement and activity. So it helps anybody.
Great. Alan, thank you. Mary Pat, I hope we got that answered okay for you. I don't see any other open questions. So, Alan, given the very late hour and knowing that you're also an early riser, so you can get back to the great work you do there, we'll go ahead and bring this to a conclusion. Although now we've got more questions, so you're going to have to hang on.
Okay.
question has been, do we know of any case reports as part of post-stroke rehab, Alan?
Oh, now, yeah. No is the answer to that. But the obvious thing is that, yes, in terms of the development of the movement, you know, when I've worked with post-stroke people with the listening program, and, you know, the other movement work I do, then again, the way that this program goes from, you know, one limb to two limbs on the same side to, you know, sequential movement, symmetrical movement, opposite limbs, would be very, very useful, I think, post-stroke. And the fact as well that there is so much repetition within it as well, and it's small chunks.
Yeah.
So I think it would be very useful, but at this stage we have no experience of that.
Yeah. My wife, Mandy, has actually sent me an instant message and asked me to share something more with Brendan.
Hi, Mandy.
That a week and a half into the movement program, Brendan, who's 7, he was really resistant to reading aloud, and he came in to Mandy and asked if she wanted him to hear him read a book. And so he proceeded to sit down and read this book to Mandy, and read the whole book independently. And he was very confident and was with ease. So it was interesting with Brendan. He had reading breakthroughs. He was learning golf, and we were working with a pro and doing lessons, and just the fluidity of his swing and his rhythm and timing. And just as I watched him proceed through the program, his movements came along, and his maturity and behavior improved as he went through it. So it's always very personal. You know, we use all the programs we're involved with, and they're within our family, and it's really been a blessing that our own son has done well with TMP. So Mandy, thanks for shooting that note over with that reminder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, Natalie has one more question for us. If you buy the 12-week program, can you repeat particular days, or do you watch once and that's it? So Alan, maybe you could just repeat how the programming of the site works for that.
Yeah. Yeah, you do have the option. You watch one module a day. Okay, so when you log in, it will deliver your daily module, so that will move you on. If you, as you mentioned earlier, Alex, if you miss, you know, a week or two and want to drop back a few days, you actually have the option of watching a previous day's module if you wish. Okay, so that does give you some flexibility within that. And as Alex mentioned earlier, there's extra time added in to allow for that to happen as well.
Great.
And that's important within schools, of course, that in terms of any school, that I don't think in the US either you have 12-week terms, do you?
No.
So there's maybe six or 7 weeks and then a week's break anyway, and that's exactly, of course, what happened in the schools that initially implemented it. So.
Alan, we've had a request, and we'll just follow up, and this will be relevant to everybody. You mentioned quite a bit of research, and we have links like to our website and different articles. Alan, by chance, could you maybe post some of those to our movement program Facebook page tomorrow?
They're on there.
Great.
The majority of the research I've mentioned is already posted on there.
On our Facebook page?
Absolutely, yes.
Great.
One of the ones that isn't, which is I think the Bassett one, yes, I can put up there. Absolutely. So yeah, if you scroll down, actually, of course, there's a lot more relevant research than we've talked about tonight.
Right.
Well.
Good. So if you just search the movement program in Facebook, like the page, and then you can access all that information. Landon is asked, do we provide or suggest particular tests to do pre-post showing reflexes that are integrated? So what would be the reflex integration testing that was used at Lee Academy, for example, or that you'd suggest for practitioners, Alan?
Those sort of, I mean, obviously there's reflex testing, there's testing on gross and fine motor, there's testing on beat competency, there's testing on reading ability, and
right.
There's a real wide range of things that can be used. So the reflex testing that was used at Lee Academy was standard reflex testing that you would learn if you trained in a reflex program.
Right.
So I guess the answer to that is whichever area of work you do, whether it's more from a point of view of being a reading specialist and assessing reading, or if it's from an OT perspective and you're assessing vestibular function and maybe reflexes, or if it's motor skills or, visual skills.
Yeah.
So you can obviously assess, tracking, pursuit and vergence and things like this, and then pre-post those. But the reason, of course, there's nothing included with the movement program in terms of pre-post is that it very much depends on who is going to do the pre-post and what other work they have in terms of background.
Right, and in that question was specific to reflexes.
Yeah.
For the study at Lee Academy, it was the primary reflex retention assessment with McPhillips.
Yes, yeah. It was Martin McPhillips's assessment from Belfast University. Yeah.
Okay, which was also the balance and coordination assessment. Also, was from the same researcher.
Yeah, that was University of Belfast.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they're publicly available, actually.
Okay. And just for note, reading outcomes were measured based on the Weschler objective reading dimensions, word basic words as well, and then of course the GCSE results, which were significant. All were statistically significant in the outcomes.
Yeah, we didn't mention the GCSEs, did we?
No, since we're here, why don't we talk about that? Because that was actually what I was most excited about, Alan. So briefly, for those that aren't in the UK, what are the GCSEs?
Yeah.
And what were those outcomes?
The GCSEs are the exams that are taken by 16-year-olds in the UK. So they're the main UK public examinations. And if you remember, the testing and the movement program itself was done in year 7. So this was with 11-year-olds or 7th grade, is it? They then just let it sit there for 5 years. They did the pre-post reading and things obviously in year 7 and got the great results there. And they tracked all those children through 4.5 years later until they did these public examinations with no other interventions. And they still had obviously the control group and the groups that had done the programs. And yes, the great fantastic thing 5 years later was that the group who'd done the movement program had statistically significant improvements in GCSE exam grades in English as well. So an average was about a grade improvement in English, about half a grade in maths, and they didn't assess any others.
And what was interesting is that the quote-unquote good readers that didn't get movement program or normal teaching did worse than the prediction to result.
Yes.
Which tells you something about kids need the supports. It's also important to share that these are large N values. So this is over 150 pupils.
Yes. Yeah.
So these aren't small sample sizes, which is why we get the statistical significance in all of these areas.
Oh yeah, yes, highly significant. You can see again if you go to, I think it's results on the website page. Yeah. You can see a write up of this with the results and the statistical analysis in there as well.
Yeah. So movementprogram.com results, and then we also there's a page with the research outcomes, and you can also download the PDF of the research. Okay, Alan, I'm actually going to really sign off now. Everybody joining us on Zoom and on Facebook Live, thank you very much. We really appreciate your interest and your engagement. And this wraps up our movement program webinar for this evening. So everyone have a great night. And Alan, we're going to let you go get some rest. Cheers, my friend.
Thank you. Lovely to see you, Alex. Thank you, everybody.
Much.